Welcome to Real Talk, the show where we look at issues facing our youth. My name is Ome Kongo, and I'm your host. And today we're talking about education in Maryland. My guest today is Curtis Valentine, Executive Director of MarylandCAN. Curtis graduated from Morehouse with a bachelor's in English and then headed to South Africa, where he provided professional development to primary school educators as a Peace Corps volunteer. After returning to the States, he spent a great deal of time working in Prince George's County. He now lives in Prince George's County, where most importantly he is the father of 2 children and is going to talk to us today about his wonderful organization, MarylandCAN. Welcome to Real Talk.
Thanks for having me.
No doubt. Now, tell us why you started MarylandCAN.
Well, MarylandCAN comes out of a education reform movement that actually began in Connecticut with a group called CONCAN. There's an organization, a state-level organization of parents and advocates saying we want to reform Connecticut, which at the time had the largest achievement gap between poor and non-poor students in the country. That model was very successful. So over 6 or 7 years, they were very influential in reducing sort of the achievement gap in Connecticut. And said, well, is this possible for us to replicate this throughout the country? So ed reformers actually in Maryland reached out to this group and said, can you bring this model to our state? We made a lot of progress on education reform, particularly in Baltimore City. But the need for reform in Maryland is tremendous. Maryland has the second largest achievement gap for 8th grade math students and for second largest in the country. And it's important that we are able to recognize that Maryland has this sort of the #1 education system in the country by Education Week, but also know that there's an underbelly of underachievement that is sort of masked by this this accolade that we have. That in places like Montgomery, like Montgomery County here, there is a growing number of students who are coming into the community who are potentially people who could be on the wrong side of the achievement gap, as well as Prince George's County and Baltimore City, which get a lot of the attention. But we're seeing in other parts of the state that there are growing levels of achievement gaps, that a group like MarylandCAN, which is sort of built on really, looking to the grassroots and sort of being a bridge between what's happening on the ground to those at the grass tops who have the power to really make the change that we need in our state.
Now, there are a lot of organizations, deal with education, and then they also say that they work at the grassroots level. They say that they're advocates for education. What makes MarylandCAN different from other organizations?
Well, I think our model has 3 tiers. It's founded on research. So we do our own research internally on what we believe are the best solutions for education reform. They are solutions that come from the national level, but also from the Maryland level. What's happening in different parts of the state that are really working. So we're state level. So we are looking from a perch saying, okay, well, if something's working in Howard County, could we replicate it in Prince George's? Or if something's working in Calvert or in Charles County, can we bring it to Montgomery County? And when I first came, I said, we have these very large achievement gaps, but there's hope because the answers that we're looking for exist right here in our state if we have the will and the wherewithal to replicate them. So we start off with research, which I think is something unique because we are both a research arm, but we also are very community mobilization centered as well. I spend a lot of my time at PTA meetings, sitting down with parents, but also in Annapolis, talking with folks as high as the governor's office and state legislators saying, this is what I'm hearing from folks who are close to the issue, and this is what they're saying. But I think we're most effective when we actually let those who are most affected by the issue be their own advocate and say, I could tell you what this parent said, but I think it's better if she spoke with you herself. And can we set up opportunities for you to visit schools, for her to write a letter to you do a video testimony, for her to come to Annapolis and testify on behalf of a particular issue. And lastly, so we have research, we have community mobilization, but lastly is advocacy. So there are a lot of groups in our state who do research very well. There are a lot of groups who do community mobilization very well. And there are a lot of folks who do the last arm of what we would do, which is advocacy, which is actually law change. How do you go to Annapolis, write legislation with legislators, with the folks at the grassroots level to pass laws? So there are many groups who do one of those 3 things. Some of them do 2 of those 3 things, but we do all 3. And it's important that we remain the voice for all of Maryland, not just for a select group of few.
a select group of few. Now that's very interesting because you kind of hinted at it in the beginning when you were talking about the achievement gap. Kind of leads to my next question. One of the things it says on your website is that you want to make state policy right. But I guess in order to start with that, we have to ask the question, what's wrong with it? I mean, from starting with the achievement gap to maybe some of the other issues, what are some of the problems that you're seeing in education as relates to Maryland state policy?
Well, we're looking at we look at three issues: greater flexibility, greater accountability, but also greater choice. What we're seeing around particularly greater choice is parents who have their children in schools that are not serving their child the best. So their child may have a unique need, and they're saying, my child has been sort of struggling in this school, his or her achievement is going down, and I want an alternative to this school because it's not really serving my child the best. We also have folks, particularly here in Montgomery County, who are saying, you know what, the school system is pretty good here, but my child has a unique gift around performing arts.
Sure.
And I'd like to have that opportunity to put my child in a performing arts school. And what we're seeing in some parts of the county is parents are actually taking their children to Washington, D.C., to schools like Duke Ellington, because they don't have that option here in Montgomery County. Similarly, you know, we have parents in Montgomery County who said, we want our child to have a Montessori education, and not having that option. Parents in this county said, we want to open up a Montessori charter school, and they were able to do that. And that is sort of the first charter school to come to this county. But that was based on sort of parents saying, we want a unique education system for a child who's not necessarily on the wrong side of the achievement gap, but also who need a unique educational experience. So to your point about legislation, Maryland has one of the worst charter school laws in the state in the country, because it does not allow for the expansion of charter schools who like to go from one county to another based on an environment where we have 24 different sort of jurisdictions, and 24 jurisdictions that sort of have a lack of standardization on how an applicant is reviewed, and then how for a charter school and how that charter is renewed. So the lack of uncertainty for many charter schools reduces their motivation to travel throughout the state with their model, but also to bring in other really innovative models from outside of Maryland, like Rocket Ship, for example, which is a blended learning model, to come to Maryland because of the restrictions on the law that I think we could do a better job of addressing in our state. There are a number of issues that we look at that may not be sort of grandiose on the surface, but have the impact that could really open up the doors and unleash a tremendous amount of potential in our state.
Well, as it relates to potential, one of the things that I found interesting is on your website is you talk about flexibility for teachers. And we know that we live in an environment where, you know, not just in Maryland, but teachers feel like they're teaching to the test, there aren't resources. Is that what you mean when you're talking about flexibility, or does it look at other issues that we may not be considering?
I think it does. I think in particular we look at flexibility of teachers. We understand, so as a father of two, there's often this old adage, well, you know, I'll bet all the money in your pocket that the amount of children you have in your home, that's the amount of different personalities you have in your home as well, because every child learns differently. And the idea that to give teachers the flexibility to both teach to the individual needs of a child, but also to give them flexibility in time and in space. So there are some models that say, you know, we want a longer school day, or teach on weekends, or things like that. Our goal is not necessarily to make a prescription about what those things should be particularly, but to say that we need to unleash the potential of teachers to fully bring everything that they bring to the table. Because teachers come with very unique experiences, whether having traveled overseas, or speaking different languages, or having their very unique gifts that say, you know, I want to use different models to get to the needs of particular students. But how we unleash that is something that I think Maryland can do and should be doing.
Now, does that conflict with something else you say on your website, which is you also advocate for more control for principals? It would seem like control for principals, flexibility for teachers don't necessarily go hand in hand. How do you all advocate that?
I think school leadership is incredibly important, and principals truly understand, you know, what their school needs, and giving principals the power to choose who's the best staff for their school, who's able to create to buy into that principal's particular model of education. Particularly in Prince George's County, you have a new policy that sort of has school-based budgeting, which puts the power back into the principal's hands to say, you know, how I allocate funding. Well, I may not need an extra janitor. I want to use that money to hire an extra, you know, computer lab technician or someone who's going to be helping choosing with tutorial. Having that power and giving that power to principals is important. But it's important that we have a level of accountability as well, which is also what we all talk about as an organization, that teachers hold principals accountable, that principals hold teachers accountable, that parents hold everyone accountable, and that there's a sort of this revolving, you know, relationship that we're all looking at how we hold each other accountable for the work we do, because in many cases principals are evaluated on how well their teachers do, and how well a principal leads has a direct effect on the potential of a teacher to meet their full potential, and that leadership is incredibly important. So I don't think they run counter to one another. It's sort of how principals, teachers, parents work together in this sort of three-legged stool to make sure that the environment for their children is the best and it reaches the individual needs of each student in their school, in their classrooms.
Now, coming from the perspective of executive director, but also being a parent right here in Maryland as well, what do you see as relates to communication issues between the three groups? I mean, I know we can write books about who's responsible for what, but do you feel like there's improved communication in the networks that you work with as relates to parents, teachers, and principals?
I think what we've seen is, so when we go out to meetings with parents, whether it be a PTA meeting or an executive board of a school, of a charter school, or leadership within a school, teachers are there, principals are there, parents are there. So parents have the ear of the principal. I think some schools do it better than others, where the principal has an open door policy with parents. But it's also important that parents come with a very constructive view of what they want to see changed. I think for us it's important that we help those parents come up with the information they need. So on our website we talk about a report card that we're doing on every school in the state. And any parent who wants to go to our website,
every school in the state.
Every school in the state.
That sounds like a daunting task.
So we, you know, and we try to improve on this model every year. Sure. Change the methodology to better get to a place where parents could say, you know what, I know my child is not learning very well. I know I'm working with my child. My child does all his or her homework. My child is very good attendance. I'm not hearing a lot back from the teacher. Something is wrong. I'm not sure. You can go to our website and you can see, well, how are students at this school faring, both by race and income, but also how this school compares to other schools in your county and how this school compares to other schools in the state. To say, well, it's not enough to tell me that my child is doing okay in this school. I'm looking for a standard that's above just okay for the school. I'm looking for a county-wide standard or a statewide standard. I think that empowers parents. So when they're going into the principal's office, they can say, Principal, you know, Dibinga, I want to talk to you about education in this area, and I have a couple questions. So why are students in this particular group not learning better than the other school? And they're in the same school, you know, they're coming the same attendance, but is there something that we can be working on? And I think that conversation is much more constructive than just scheduling a meeting and not really having sort of the details or more information in order to get to the heart of the problem. There are systems set up for communication. The question is, are we having those conversations that are really, you know, in a place that we're getting to the root of the problem, which I think is something that, as an organization, MarylandCAN can contribute to.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about the root of the problem as well as more of your initiatives when we come back from our break.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with more Real Talk.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
Have a kit so you're ready for any emergency. Develop a plan for what you and your family will do before disaster strikes, and stay informed during severe weather any way you can.
Welcome back to Real Talk, the show where we look at issues facing our youth. Once again, my name is Ome Congo, and we're talking with Curtis Valentine, Executive Director of Maryland Can? Hearing a lot of information, a lot of parents out there, a lot of teachers who will want to learn more about what it is that you all do. One of the programs I find interesting that you all have is called the Bridge the Gap Initiative. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Bridge the Gap was a campaign that we launched in January of 2012. Our campaign was a statewide initiative to reform education through three pieces of policy reform or legislation that we introduced in Annapolis this previous legislative session. One being how do we improve parental involvement in our state, another being how we expand access to pre-kindergarten and early child development, but also how we reform the current charter school law in our state as well. I think those three pieces of legislation speak volumes about how we see education reform, particularly looking at early child development, and understanding that by expanding access to early child development for those who need it most, we can really close achievement gaps even before they start.
Sure.
A lot of gaps start when children are not in pre-K when they should be, and we also understand that investing in pre-K is a best investment over time. It's a savings of for every $1 you invest in pre-K, it's a $7 savings over the life of that child.
$7.
And those savings come in children less likely to be in special education. When your per pupil it goes much higher because the student-teacher ratio is much lower in special education classes. Students are less likely to be left back, where you're sort of in school for 1 or 2 more years than you're supposed to, which is another per pupil allocation every year that you probably wouldn't have needed if you were in school every day. And then students are more likely to drop out. Similarly, again, when you invest so much in a child and they eventually drop out and don't have anything to show for it with a degree, that investment, again, is sort of compromised. So we said, how can we expand pre-kindergarten throughout our state? Because it's important to achievement, but it's also a way to show that we are looking at education holistically. Parental involvement, I think we are an organization that understands that parents are our first teachers, and that the impact a parent has from the time a child is born up until they reach a classroom, those days are really, really precious. And we also understand that we can't legislate parental involvement, but we can do as much as we can to reduce the barriers that parents are saying restrict them from becoming more involved in their child's classroom, in their child's school, and to attend PTA meetings. So we advocated for a law that would have given the same rights to parents to go to PTA meetings that most voters have on election day, and people who are called the jury duty have on those days. So we say, well, your boss will give you time off to go to jury duty, they'll give you time off to go vote, even if you don't even have
but not for a PTA meeting.
But not for a PTA meeting.
Wow, that's true.
And it sort of, again, speaks to how we view education in our state, and whether we look at it from purely a parent-student relationship, or we're looking at it from a economic development lens, a job creation lens, and making the case to small businesses saying, you know what, this is an opportunity for you to say to your employee, that even though you don't have leave time left, you're having a student in your home who's doing very well, makes you a better worker because you're not worried so much about how the child is doing in school. But also as an employer, I understand that over the life of my, being a business owner, I need a strong workforce to come up, and having an achievement gap here in Maryland makes it much more difficult for me to, create more jobs, to get more investment from outside of our state. So parental involvement was something we were very, very happy to champion. And lastly, we talked about the charter reform that we believe gives greater access to charter schools for many parents in our state. In Maryland, we have over 12,000 students who are on waiting lists for charter schools.
Wow.
Not in charter schools, on waiting lists. And what we say is, charter schools are not for everybody. There are some students who are being served by their public school. Their parents like the public school. The student like the public school. They're doing very well. I think that's works very well for them. But for those 12,000 students and their thousands and thousands of parents who are saying, we've tried this, it's not working. I don't have the resources to move to a new district, and I can't afford a private school. Curtis, what should I do? I've tried charter schools, but I'm on waiting list because they're just not enough, and the demand is so high. We're saying, how can we address that demand with quality charter schools in our state. Again, this is sort of these three initiatives in our Bridge the Gap campaign is a way to bridge the gap between those who are on the wrong side of the achievement gap and those who are on a path to go off and do very, very extraordinary things.
Now, what would you say to the argument where people say, well, it's great that you may want to strengthen charter schools and the laws and the like, but honestly, they feel like charter schools are a drain from public school resources, and they feel like there's a division that's created. You know, you think of movies like documentaries like Waiting for Superman and the like that go deep into this. Do you feel like people need to look at it as a us versus them, public versus charter schools, or is there a way to really come together on this issue?
Yes, I think we have to come together. It's not a if. We have to come together. I mean, there are households where you have one student in a charter school and one student in a public school. Those children are not being pit against one another in a household. You know, they go to this school, they go to the Montessori school here in Montgomery County because, you know what, little Ome Congo, you know, really likes this type of education. He needs this to flourish and for him to reach his full potential. But Curtis, you know, is very interested in this type of learning environment that is only provided in the public school, and he needs that environment. It's not a us versus them. I think in Maryland, it's important that we look at charter schools, public schools, as sort of one and the same, a path to closing achievement gaps, and making sure that we have quality public schools and quality charter schools, but that those who have unique needs and unique gifts are served no matter where they go.
Well, what are some of MarylandCAN's success stories? Well, what are some initiatives you feel like maybe it's to bridge the gap, or other programs that you've undertaken that you feel have done a great job in maybe changing a law or advancing the conversation or raising awareness? What are some of the things when you look at, you say, you know, I really want to have success on that level with some of our other projects?
Well, I mean, I'm proud of the level of partnerships we've made across the state with some reformers who are doing great things on their own before we came. And for us to say, how can we add value? How can we really push the argument further? How can we contribute some of the research that we've done? How can we contribute our community mobilization model? How we can contribute some of the e-advocacy tools we use to really make advocating much more portable, even just using your smartphone, being able to really be an advocate on the move in many ways. I think those partnerships we made, we started off really trying to make the case that we even need a MarylandCAN in Maryland. And over the course of the year, I think those who we partner with can definitely say we do need a MarylandCAN, and the value they add is significant. I think also, to your point about sort of exposing the information about the achievement gap, the data. So when I mentioned to you at the beginning, second largest achievement gap, most people say,
Maryland,
wow, Maryland, you know, wow, you know.
Maryland can't be on that list.
and it's sort of, so at every level. So I can go from, you know, a legislator's office and share information with him or her. I can go to a parent. I can go to a parent and say, this is where your school ranks in the county, and they may not know that information. So I think how we uncover information and share that with people empowers them to get involved. Like, you know what, now that I know about that, Curtis, I want to do something about it, which I think is tremendous. But I think also us shaping the education conversation around things that are not just sort of direct education related. We say that great schools change everything. They change crime rates, they change healthcare statistics, they change the price of your house, whether they go up or down based on the quality of school and how much the value of your home is, but also jobs. And I think that's something that I'm really proud of. We have a dilemma over the long term that if we don't address education in our state, it will make it make it harder for us to attract foreign direct investment and other investment in Maryland because of the lack of highly middle and high skilled trained Marylanders to fill the jobs and middle and high skilled positions that are being created. So over time, if we don't improve those graduation rates and put people in community colleges and in four-year institutions, we'll have to import people from outside of Maryland to fill the jobs that we can't fill with Marylanders. So that's education, but that's jobs. That's economic development, and our ability to make that argument as well. brings people into education, into the education conversation that would not traditionally be there. People who don't have children in schools.
Right.
That conversation, that brings in police officers into the conversation. It brings in nurses. It brings in real estate agents who are saying, wow, this education system has a direct impact on not only me as an individual, but of my community and the like. And I think what I'm most proud of is when I go to PTA meetings and you'll see women and men in those meetings, and I'll say, great, what grade is your child in? Like, well, I don't have a child in the school. I live down the street. And this school is in my community, and I joined the PTA because I want to invest in this school, because the children who walk by my house, or the children who I see, or the children I speak with, are going to one day be leaders in our community. And that makes me proud that we're expanding the conversation, bringing new people in, and really capitalizing and leveraging all the success that those who come before us have done a tremendous job on. But there's so much work to do. There's more than enough work for us to do. And we say, we're here to add value any way we can, and to really push the argument and say, anyone can really get involved. Everyone has to get involved, because it's such an urgent issue, and we don't have the time to wait.
Oh, no doubt. Now, let's get a little more real talk here.
Okay.
You're a parent of two, and before you got involved in MarylandCAN, you had a career in the international world. Is having your kids what really led you to decide to focus on this local issue as it relates to your schools, thinking about their future?
Well, so you mentioned my experience as a Peace Corps volunteer in South Africa and living in a very rural village, no electricity, no running water, getting up every morning, walking to school. And because of the Peace Corps volunteer, I looked a little different. So I had an escort, about 20 or 30 kids, and we'd walk together. More than half of them didn't have shoes on. More than half of them didn't have breakfast that morning. But they ran into those classrooms with a certain level of vigor and passion. And they sat in the room, 60 to a room, so excited about learning, so enamored about the possibilities of having education and what it could do for them. Many of them had one pen and one piece of paper because their parents gave them one notebook for the entire year. And that level of enthusiasm about education really reinforced the idea that there are groups around the world who are really working to strive hard to become better educated for a world economy. And I came back to Maryland and began teaching here in Prince George's County, and did not see that level of enthusiasm of students. And I said, well, the light has gone off for a lot of these students, and the light is still on for students from around the world. So the seed was planted then, but I think my experience around the world working on advocacy in developing countries, working on education in developing countries, sort of gave me the skill set that I needed to be successful in this job. I've always seen myself as sort of a world citizen, someone who sees the interconnectedness of, Kenyans and Bosnians and Hondurans, and saying we live in this global society, and the way we educate our students here in the U.S. has ripple effects, and we need to prepare students to go off into the world and be contributors in the world. And I think developing countries and developed countries around the world are doing a better job of that. And I think America is getting to that point. We're not there yet, but how we educate our populace and how prepared they are to be global citizens will make all the difference in our ability to continue to be a world power.
So where can people go to learn more?
Well, you can go to our website, MarylandCAN.org. You can follow me on Twitter at Curtis Everyday. And follow us on Facebook as well. And sign up with us, get information about the work we do. We have e-newsletters and research roundups, but also I write op-eds on issues that I think are really important. But we also have parents who are blogging for us, and we really empower parents and have their voice be heard. But look forward to everyone who wants to work with us. This is a tremendously important issue in our state, and we need everyone to contribute to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That's going to do it for another episode of Real Talk. If you have any questions, email me at realtalk@omecango.com. Remember, our children are 50% of our population, but 100% of our future. Let's make sure we're taking care of them. See you next time.